Morning, Sherry. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Ryan. How are you?
Doing good, and we are 5 months in the waiting for us to finally record some of the fun conversations that we had when we met in Palm Springs. And for the listeners that don't know about you, maybe can you take us back to the day that you decided to become an entrepreneur? Because I think you did some pretty cool, crazy things in order to jump in. Because you jumped in with both feet for sure. So, what happened? Was it where were you, and then how did you end up doing it?
Well, my company is in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was working for another company in this space. And though my title was Vice President of Sales, my real job was a professional apologist. I mean, everything that you could do wrong, we were doing wrong. And it just got to where all I did all day long was apologize to customers for all the things that we were doing wrong. And I could not get my bosses to listen to my ideas for ways to improve our service. So, in frustration, I just quit my job and had a week long yard sale and sold all my personal belongings and cashed in my 401k and set up shop in my basement competing with my former company. And it turned out pretty well.
I was going to say that. So that's called both feet in completely. So,
Absolutely.
what can you give us a little bit of a rundown of exactly what the nature of the business was?
The company was called LetterLogic, and it was processing and delivering patient statements for hospitals. So, healthcare entities nationwide would send their billing data to us electronically, and then we would download the data, do some calculations for them, rearrange the data so that it looked beautiful on a page, and then we would print a physical bill and have machines that would fold its stuff, sort it by zip code, and then mail it. And at the end, we were doing about 400,000 of those a day.
That's and there's a huge infrastructure because I'm familiar with your industry. And how did you end up doing that in your basement? I mean, how did you start with all? Was it did you have a bunch of that equipment, or were you outsourcing that? And how did you find the clients?
No, early on in my basement was me with a couple of filing cabinets that I bought from Goodwill and an old door that became my top of those filing cabinets. And I was strictly a sales organization. I found a company in town, that one company that I outsourced all the IT work to, and then another company that I outsourced the fulfillment part to. And it was just a sales organization until we were about 2 million in revenue. And then I realized I just had to start doing all those other functions myself in order to make the company scalable.
So, how long did it take you to? What was the time frame between that and the 2 million?
About 18 months.
Wow, that's that's pretty fast growth. And what year was this that you started?
And January of 2002.
2002. And so you were going out and just finding the clients, and then so what were some of the things that triggered you to then bring some of that stuff in house? Was there just capacity issues, or?
Just really just the awareness that, I was giving all my money away. Could never really get ahead by not bringing those functions in house, and also not having control of, of the service, and just, wanted to be in
Mhm.
control of every facet of the service for the clients.
Well, and I think that kind of relates to the question that I was going to ask about when you started the business. You said you were a professional apologist. What was your vision to set out? Did you have, like, when you were sitting in the basement by yourself, or did you have like a target revenue amount? Did you have like a certain thing that you wanted to do to the industry to change it, or what was getting you up? What was driving you every day?
I wasn't really smart enough to think about it, the way you just presented it. I just knew that I could do it better than the folks that I've been working for before. And I pursued, I wasn't pursuing a particular revenue number. I was just pursuing being the best in the business. And I thought that I could accomplish that by taking better care of the employees. Because when I looked at my previous employers, like, all of our problems were human error, simple human error. And I thought that nobody cared as much as I cared. If they'd cared as deeply about the product as I cared, then we wouldn't have had all the screw ups. So I just set out to make a culture that took such good care of the employees, that because they were so engaged and cared so much, that they would then take great care of the customer, and the customer would take care of me by paying more for the product, and that would take care of me, the shareholder.
And I think your philosophy as a track record of working spectacularly, right? So let's
Wow.
well, what some of the things that you've done that the listeners need to hear about. So let's peel that back a little bit. What are some of the ways that you implemented this, and how did you take that idea and then actually spread that throughout the company? Because you've gotten a lot of attention and limelight around this because of some of the interesting things that you implemented.
I think the most important thing that I did that really affected the business positively was the idea of sharing the profits with the employees. So I gave a 10% profit share every month. And the important part of it is that it was the share was split evenly. So no matter what your role within the company, you got the same dollar amount. That meant the CFO got the same thing the truck driver got. And the point was to make everybody know that their job was just as important as every other job in getting out a perfect product at the end of the day. And no job was more important or less important than the others. And it also really changed behavior. We were very transparent with the employees to show them exactly how we made money and how screw ups would impact profitability and how that would then affect their profit share checks. And so it changed the behavior of the employees and made them care a whole lot more about the end product.
How did you get your employees to understand? Was there like financial education that you were giving? Because I think there's so much, there's so much preconceived notions about doing what you were just saying. And I think, you saw the ramifications and the benefit of doing that. But there's all these reasons that people give on why they shouldn't do that. How did you teach your employees to get that? And how did you get to the point that you were okay being transparent with everybody?
I think that's just my nature to be direct and transparent. So that was not a hurdle for me. There was a hurdle in teaching people about what created profitability within the company. And so every month we had a meeting where everybody dropped exact whatever they were doing, and we came together and we reviewed the financials. We reviewed the top line revenue and bottom line and all the things that impacted the two. And so we could celebrate new clients and then lament, big screw ups that we had internally. And with a company that small, initially, everybody knew if we screwed something up, everybody knew exactly what we were talking about. But we could see there live on the screen the number, the dollar amount that was attributed to that.
Which is it's huge. It's huge. I mean, did you have hard times having people catch on, or was it weird for people, new employees, as they were coming on, the probably the shift in culture versus where they were coming from?
No, from the beginning, the profit share checks were like $7 and then $17. And it's amazing that even at that point where, the profit share check is a $17 physical check, we celebrated that. And every person was happy to get that extra $17. But toward the end, it was almost $1,500.
Wow.
And so every person could see our progress internally and know what was creating that higher number. And it's one of the few organizations that I've seen where people didn't resent the salespeople. Everybody knew that the sales team made a lot more money than everybody else, but because they were bringing in everything that drove that top line, we celebrated them, and we did not resent the bigger paychecks that they were making. And a lot of profit share systems within companies, they don't include the salespeople because they think, well, the salespeople are already the highest paid. They shouldn't have part of this. But I think that they absolutely should be included so that they are incentivized to sell the right type of account at the right price. So I think that the profit share piece all around was transformative for us. And it's vital, crucial to who we were and to our success.
Well, and you were telling me this really cool story about like how they were making decisions together on a team. And I can't remember exactly what it was, Sherry, but it was like, there was like, we needed to hire someone. And then you had these two people sat down and they kind of went through it. Does that ring a bell at all? I mean, I don't know, maybe it's that example, or you got another example of how people would solve problems in the bigger picture.
Well, can give you a dozen examples, but the one you're talking about is where the sort team said they needed 2 more people. And so I sat with them and said, fine, we can absolutely do that. I agreed to bring on the 2 people. And then I said, have y'all discussed how this is going to affect profit share? If we have 2 more people with which to share that pie, with whom to share that pie, what does that do? And somebody did the calculations very quickly and said, ooh, well, we need to think about this. And so they came back the next day and said, oh, we figured this out. We've totally got it. We only need 1 person.
Problem solved, right?
It really changed their behavior that way.
How about the culture? So, you got the profit sharing, which is at the core of the financials, which you said changed a lot of people's behaviors. What are some of the other things in your culture that were changing behaviors, or what was some of the impact on the behaviors that you noticed?
Well, I'd say, the second most important thing we did was make sure that everybody was paid fairly, a fair living wage. And for us, we looked at the 2 lowest paid employees in the company and determined if these 2 people get married, in what neighborhood can they afford to live? What schools can their children attend? Will they make enough money to save money and to be able to afford an education for their children, or to be able to afford a vacation even? And so with that in mind, our starting minimum wage was $16 an hour in the factory, where in Tennessee it's $7.25 an hour. So we paid more than double what we could have gotten away with in Tennessee, because we wanted people to be able to focus on their jobs when they were at work, not whether or not their lights would be on when they came home.
Well, and didn't you see someone speak and you came home and it took you a couple of tries to get to that $16 figure, didn't it?
Yes, we were at $12 an hour, and then somebody told me this theory of looking at the 2 lowest paid people and what happened if they got together. And so immediately, within about 48 hours, I had changed our minimum wage to $14 an hour. And then I kept doing the math, and I just had to make it $16 an hour, because no matter how I did the math, $16 an hour in Nashville was the magic number that would make somebody be able to have, a fair living wage.
And wasn't there a specific woman or employee that was working a bunch of jobs, and then all of a sudden, because it changed people's lives, just that one move?
It's changed so many lives. One woman is my age, I'm 58, and she said at that point, making $16 an hour, it was the first time in her entire life that she had been able to work only one job. And ironically, she was now working just one job and taking her grandchildren in so her daughter could work a second and third job. So it's just a crazy cycle. But I have another employee, Maria, who, when we hired her at $16 an hour, she was able to work just 40 hours and go home and take care of the kids. And her husband, who's a highly skilled construction worker, could, for the first time, take on overtime because he didn't have to be home with the children. And they were able to, in 18 months, save $50,000 to buy their first home.
That's so crazy. Is she the one that was the story about you guys potentially? Because you did some really interesting things about helping people get into first houses and such like that, right? Was that the example? Or maybe give the listeners some of the other interesting things that you were doing to help your employees actually have better lives?
Yeah, well, some of our other benefits were the ability to bring your kids and your pets to work. And so the pets were there regularly. The kids were there on snow days or holidays that where they needed to be at work, but they just brought their kids in. And then we also helped people buy their first home, so a gift toward the down payment of their first houses. And so I think through that program we helped 19 employees buy homes.
Oh my gosh! It's it's such a different perspective of, instead of using the employees as worker bees and shippers and doers and cogs, and actually helping them change their lives. And I find it just, the question that I think a lot of people have, Sherry, is how do you afford that? So did you just have a really profitable industry where you're able to just, kind of like Google, just give stuff away and have lattes and all that stuff? Or what, how, right? I think that's a big challenge, because there's, that the whole minimum wage thing right now is on the hot topic list for a lot of retailers, a lot of people, where they rely on these lower income people. So is it the chicken or the egg? What did you experience?
When people ask me, how could you afford to do this? my stock response to them and to you right now is that we weren't successful in spite of the crazy benefits that we provided. We were only successful because of it. I entered the industry when the market was mature. I didn't know enough about business at the time to know that I was entering a mature market. It was mature and very commoditized, very thin margins. And so I knew that we had to be as error free as possible to eke out a living doing it. And that was having a culture that took care of the employees seemed to me to be the best way to drive profitability. It was just a common sense approach to me that really did work. And so I looked at all those things that we did for the employees. It was an investment.
Was there you? I think you were talking. How did your customers see the impact, and how did your pricing? You told me some interesting facts about your pricing and the margins and the interactions with the customers. How did that ripple effect go all the way down to the actual transaction of your services?
That's a really good point. So our culture became, we didn't spend any money in marketing. Our culture became marketing, the marketing tool, because when potential clients heard about our culture, they immediately recognized how that would affect the service that they were getting. And so we had many customers who said, we chose you because of that. We knew that having people totally engaged in taking care of the business would positively affect us. And so it enabled us to be the price leaders nationwide. So we were 10% higher than just about anybody else in the industry and still grew at a pace that allowed us to be on the Inc. 5000 list for 11 straight years.
Oh, that's crazy. So go one layer deeper for the listeners. And what are some of the major milestones over the course of the years that you hit from employee size or revenue size, whatever you're willing to disclose?
Well, we started in January 2002 with just 2 employees. And when I sold the company in 2016, we had 54 employees. And we grew from 0 to 40 million in revenue. And sustained growth, especially. I guess we were at the beginning year of Inc. tracking these growing companies. So for every year, we were on that 5,000 list.
That's crazy. I mean, that sustainable growth like that, because some people hit it once or twice, but that's way different than obviously you had implemented something, especially with your culture, that made your company a marketing machine. That's so. What?
One year we were number 4,999, but we still made the
list. Hey, that's all that counts. You're on the list. Where was it, Sherry? I mean, where was it that happened for you to decide that this was going to be something that you wanted to sell? I mean, was there a triggering event? I mean, how much you loved your employees and your culture and everything like that. What made you decide that this might be the right time to sell?
Well, we had gone through a phase of profitable month after month. Maybe we'd had 60 or 70 months of profitability, and back to back 2 months, I lost money. And then had to go in front of the employees with this full transparency and say, we didn't make money, so there's no profit to share. And I realized that it was my fault that we were losing money because I was pursuing, what I call now a shiny object. While our company had historically printed and mailed bills, the industry was going toward having everything done electronically, and I was trying to build a machine internally for us to be able to do that instead of partnering with third parties. And I had spent millions of dollars pursuing this e-commerce model when I realized that was really not good for the company, and that I was really trying to become something that we weren't. We were a great service company, and instead of embracing that, I was chasing something else. And so when I realized that and started dropping that pursuit, for the first time ever, our bottom line started really outgrowing the top line. And you saw a chart, if there was a chart in front of you of our history from day one to that moment, anybody in the business of selling companies would tell you that was exactly the right time to sell, because we had 12 months of the bottom line shooting straight up, and the top line still growing significantly. And so from the trailing 12 months EBITDA picture, which is how company valuations are created often, it was just exactly the right time to sell. And it coincided with the fact that my granddaughter, a teenager, was coming to live with me, and I knew I needed to be more available to be a mom again, in a sense, for a while. And so just
Was there someone that mentioned to you, like, where did you get that, okay, this is the right time to sell? Was there, like, was it a peer group? Was it an advisor? Was it someone in the industry? Was there maybe just, your education over the time?
Oh, Lord, no. It was an outsider. Brad Stevens is his name, and I had hired him to be interim COO just to help me figure out, what was wrong and why we were losing money. And I knew it instinctively, but I just wasn't willing to face it. And so within a few weeks, he sized up what the problem was and was very direct with me about the situation and what I needed to change. And so I just listened to him. And then he started a process with my leadership team where every Monday and every Thursday we had a mini valuation leadership team.
Why those dates?
Well, we had our leadership meeting every Monday and then every Thursday just to see where we were. And you would think that a company valuation can't change much from a Thursday to a Monday, but if you lose a big customer, it can change a lot. Or if you add a good sized customer, the valuation can change a lot. And it did. And so it made all of us aware of what was driving the value of the company and changed our behavior too.
What are some of the value drivers that's ended up sticking out for you?
Most importantly, I think having the right pricing model. I realized that a lot of our biggest customers, our flagship customers, we weren't making any money on. And what's the point in having them if you don't make money on them? So I personally called each of them and said, I'm raising your rate. This is how much. And it's amazing, but not a single customer left us.
Interesting. How did you was it like some sort of like deep dive into like the contracts with them, or like, how did you end up finding that you were losing money on them?
Just looking at, profitability overall and how much energy and how much of our resources these larger clients took. And that, the larger clients had the lowest prices, but they were consuming most of their company resources, and just asking them to pay more, and they were willing to do it.
I think that scares the heck out of a lot of people. I remember going through that with our business, and it's a very, very common trap that entrepreneurs get into. Was there some way that you relate it to them? Was there any kind of tips that you have on, like, how do you even have that hard conversation?
I think it mattered a lot to the customers that I did it myself. I didn't put it off on anyone else. I called the highest level person within each organization with whom that I dealt with. So if it was CEO to CEO, or sometimes CEO to the CFO, I made the call myself and said, I hate to deliver this bad news, but have to raise your rate, and this is why. And I went into every single phone call knowing that I might lose the customer, but that our company was better off not having this customer if they weren't profitable. And then it became fun, actually. And to have the conversations with the customers who were laughing, a few laughed with me and said, "Man, I wish I had the courage to do this because I need to." So you've set a great example for me, and the fact that we could do all that and not lose any customer really spoke to how well our business model worked, how well that employee first business model affected the customer and affected their loyalty to us.
And and when you're probably doing that, now you've got 55 employees looking at you going, Sherry, you got to go call these people because we want our bonus checks.
Exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. So, Sherry, as you're going through this and you're having these little mini business valuations, I mean, how did your mindset shift at all, and like start planning, or like what is this going to look like, or how did you go from starting to do that to actually engaging in the process to the actual sale?
Well, it started with hiring a business broker. I hired Mike Nolan of Empire Business Brokers in Raleigh, North Carolina, and he had a really unique approach to brokering a company in that he does free valuations for companies, and he just hopes that eventually, when you're ready to sell, you'll use him. But he took like a teacher's stance. I mean, he taught us, my executive team, exactly what was driving profitability and what would drive the value of the company, and what were things that we were doing that would not increase the value of the company. And so he calmly and quietly and humbly taught us, and it became really a fabulous learning process, but it was fun. The process of getting the company ready to sell was the most fun we ever had. And especially when you can see little tweaks that you can make to the business model that make everything tighter and more scalable, it was a blast.
What are some of those besides the pricing model that he exposed?
I think that the impact of just having one extra person, that if there was not an ROI on that person, that's the one that I can think of right now.
So no, that's totally fine. And I'm curious, so he's a business broker, and I think there's a lot of confusion sometimes out in the marketplace, like who is a broker, what kind of service do you get versus an investment banker, and at 40 million in revenue, you're totally investment banking material. Was he actually an investment banker, or was there any kind of difference in how he approached it versus how some of the other people do?
No, I mean, I interviewed several people. I interviewed some of those investment bankers to talk to them about selling the company. I just liked his approach more. He had been with Ernst & Young for years and is a CPA and also a lawyer. So he's very smart, but he really just took more of a teacher's or a coach's standpoint, and wasn't pushing us to sell the company, just telling us, when you get ready to, these are things that will you get the highest price for the company.
So as he's doing, and he's educating you, was there like a triggering event or somewhere in the process that you said, okay, now is the time?
It was just looking at the trailing 12 months picture.
So then so then you engage with him, and then did you have an idea of who would be the buyer? I mean, like in your mind, because I mean, as entrepreneurs, a lot of us are visionaries, and I know you've got a lot of aspirations of big things. So did you have an idea of what this journey was going to look like?
Sort of. We had a lot of interest for the past, for the previous 5 years, from people wanting to buy the company, and most were competitors, but other people who just wanted to buy a company like ours to sell and scale, to buy to scale and sell, I should say. Mm-hmm. And so, we had a short list of people we knew would be interested, and Mike expanded that list, and so he cast a fairly broad net, and we had several buyers at the table. And so, he coached us on answering their questions and doing the quote unquote dog and pony show.
Mm-hmm. So the dog and pony show, I think, is an interesting. What were some of the things that you found throughout the process that people were looking for? I mean, did you, is there any kind of takeaways you had over the dog and pony show and how the different buyers liked different things? I mean, what was your favorite part or most interesting part about it?
Well, some people were looking for, a business in a box, something that would operate totally on its own and that they would not have to be involved in at all, just, a cash machine. And others were really looking for, companies that they could run. And so the difference between the two is that some would want to keep our entire leadership team and every employee intact, and that was vital to me. And others were upfront about the fact that, we're going to replace your entire leadership team because we want to be the leadership team, but we will keep your other employees.
What were some of I mean, because you had mentioned it on the employee side, what were some of your table stakes that this is what I have to have? Was it a dollar amount in the bank? Was it, culture, employees, what they were going to do with the business? What were some of the things that were crazy important to you?
Most importantly was that they would take care of the employees and try to maintain the culture that we had. And, I also had a dollar figure of, but what was enough for me to be able to move on to the next phase of my life. So it was a combination of things.
How did you handle that when you're sitting across from these buyers and you've got these 50 people plus that are sitting there that are your family? How were you how are you gut checking them and whether they could, I mean, you're graduating your kids to someone else to be watched. I don't know if that's a weird analogy, but I mean, how are you mentally and personally going through that?
What I try to make them see is that the reason you want this company, the reason we're so attractive on paper, is because of the people and because of our culture and taking care of the people. That is exactly what's driven the value of this company. And please remember that and try to keep all of these things that we have going right now in place. If and I wanted to gauge their commitment to keeping the culture in place, and having them come in and meet some of the employees, or noticing the employees as they walk through and see how engaged they were.
How did you make sure that, as you were structuring the deal, and I don't know what kind of advisors you had at the table, but making sure that, because for example, if it's a PE firm or if it's a venture capital or if it's, they look at a company like yours and they understand, how to squeeze more, blood out of the turnip. I mean, was there stuff in language that you put in there to make sure that there was certain things that were taken care of, or was it just more of like, hey, more on an oversight of, hey, we just want to make sure that it's a good culture fit? Was there how did you guys end up structuring that?
I would probably structure it a little differently now in hindsight, but we tried to make sure that there was a good cultural fit. So though we had several prospective buyers and several offers, we ultimately chose one that it was a PE firm that was buying us to combine us with another company in their space, that in our space, that they'd already bought. And we already knew and liked the leadership team of the other company and felt like they would probably most be able to protect the culture that we'd built.
So was there other people so that if they were in the same industry, were there other buyers that were in different industries or customers, or like what were some of the other backgrounds of the other buyers?
Several others in the industry, and other wannabes. I mean, people who just really wanted to get into the healthcare revenue cycle part.
Was there, so when you said there's a couple of things you would have done differently, I mean, you know, before we go into the after you had signed the deal and some of the time afterwards, I mean, when you sat at that table and you're signing those documents, and did you feel the deal momentum, rush that a lot of the entrepreneurs feel, where it's just driving forward and you haven't had time to mentally process it, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there at the signing table? Can you kind of walk us through what was going on in your head when you were sitting there actually realizing what was going on?
I don't know that I went through that. I know that there was a process, maybe in the last 30 days, when the final parts of the due diligence are being done and there are missing documents here and there, and everyone is frantically looking for those documents. And I think it must be like, well, for me, it was like planning your wedding, and it's just you're getting cold feet the last few days before the wedding, but you've already got all the guests are on their way, and the cake is already in the oven, and you realize you have to go through with that. I probably had a little bit of that, and mostly it was around my people, knowing that I would be walking out and leaving this group of people that I love, that I'm really close to.
How did your employees know that what was going on, or like who was involved in that?
I didn't tell them. I told the leadership team. There were a total of 6 of us, and I told them and gave them a nice chunk of cash to, as a percentage of the deal, for them to be engaged, because I told them they'd probably never work harder in their lives than they would during that 18-month process to get the company ready. And so I told them, and then I told the employees after the day the deal was done. So I brought everybody together in one room and told them that I had sold the company and that my last day would be the following Monday. And
Was that hard?
oh, I cry now telling you about it. So yes, it was hard. But I was, through the years of giving 10% of the profit monthly to the employees, I was able to give 15% of the cash price to the employees at the end. And for the first time, it wasn't split evenly. It was split based on their tenure within the company. And so it was pretty funny to be with somebody that I would ask if I had one-on-one meetings with every single employee and said, if I were able to give you $10,000, what would you do with it? And to have them talk about what they might do with it, and then to be able to say, well, here's 50,000. Hope you enjoy this. But to see how they treated the money after that, I mean, and one of the most satisfying things that happened the entire time I owned the company came as a result of this gift that I was able to give each person. When a 25-year-old woman approached me 2 months after the sale to tell me that she had paid her parents' house off with her money.
Oh, how cool.
They were Serbian refugees, and she had overheard them talking about when, as soon as they got their house paid off, they would be able to send funds to Serbia to help some relatives there find a home. And so she just said, I'm paying it off for you, Mom and Dad. And she said she would not have thought about doing something like that had she not been in the LetterLogic environment of taking care of each other and treating everybody like family. That was very satisfying.
Well, it's something that has a direct reflection of you and how you manage the culture and the morality. What was it like? So aside from giving people the money, which is got to feel unbelievable, but how did you feel knowing that you were no longer going to be part of that community anymore?
Sad. I made the mistake of I was asked to, although it was an all cash deal, I was invited to invest in the new entity and to be a member of the board. And so I chose to go that route. And so I told them, I'll be around, I'll be on the board, and I'll be able to influence from that vantage point. And it's just really hard to be a minority shareholder and not really have the control that I was accustomed to. So about 6 months into my investment, I just, cashed out and exited the board too. It was just too difficult.
What were some of the difficult things other than the control? I mean, how did the things change as far as the culture, the operations? Were there things there that you were watching, not having control of, that were very difficult?
Yeah, well, the first thing that changed was they did away with the profit share model.
Oh my gosh.
And instead instituted a matching 401k, which was nice. And I can see benefits to that for helping employees learn to, plan ahead and manage their money better. But it was so integral to who we were that was, pretty painful. So,
did it affect the culture at all?
I think it did. A lot of the employees left, but
Like a lot of them, like as in like a good chunk, or
I would say that probably only 50% of the employees that were there when I left are still there now.
50 or 15?
I'd say 50.
Okay. Wow, that's
guessing.
How did I'm curious because I went through this and I've heard so many stories now, Sherry. How did the employees and the executive team look at you afterwards in that 6 months? I mean, did they engage with you the same, or was it different? How did they handle that?
I think that was the hardest part for me, is that the senior leadership team really wanted to, have the autonomy and to be on their own with this other management team they were paired with. And so in the first few weeks, they made a few phone calls to me. And then after that, it was only in crisis they would call. And the other employees, I have a closer relationship with. I think I see them fairly often. But it was, I'm surprised that none of them were angry at me or resented me for selling. They were grateful for, the time that we had together, and for, being part of something really fabulously unique. And I love the way the employees that are still there have kind of banded together and create for themselves within these little circles the same culture that we had. And it was a hard realization for me that the goals of private equity, they're not evil. They're just, their goals are different than the goals of the founder entrepreneur.
Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I think the listeners need to really understand that.
Well, the goal for me as the founder of the company was about building the best company I could build. and the tightest company and a group of happy employees. And the goal of private equity is to satisfy the needs of the shareholder. And so
So how would you have, when you think about these entrepreneurs that are potentially going to go through the sale or the exit over the next handful of years, how do you figure out what those goals are and how do you align those up? I mean, and would you have done anything differently?
yes.
well, well, maybe let's start with that. What would you have done differently to have a different outcome?
uh, I think that now, with hindsight being 2020, 18 months later, I would not have been acquired. I would have done the acquisition myself. I would have, I thought that my smaller company could really infect the larger organization with our positive culture and the family like culture. And I think that's really hard for a smaller group to do that. So I would have been the acquirer and just handheld the process to have the culture shift to the other company too.
I think, yeah, well, when you have two way different cultures, I think it can really affect the success of the merger or acquisition. And how do I think you and I were talking at breakfast that one morning is, the PE industry or that whole world. It's like the checkers versus 3D chess, where as an owner you've built this amazing thing and you're playing the game of changing an industry or changing a culture, and then all of a sudden you sit at the table and it's trying to understand their motives and what their goals are. How do you have any advice from what you've gone through on questions to ask and how to understand whether that buyer in that situation is going to actually accomplish what you want?
I don't, but that's a great question. I need to ponder that. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for that, Ryan.
No. It's totally fine because I don't know either. That's why I asked. Because a lot, Bo Burlingham in his book Finish Big talks about knowing who you are, what you want from your business, and why. And if you know that, that's great. But you still don't necessarily know how to align and who this person is that's sitting across from you, what they're going to end up doing with your quote unquote baby, and it's very difficult to understand that.
Yeah, and you really have no control over it, and maybe some influence, but no control.
Right. What what did how did you mentally handle the transition after that 6 months? I mean, internally, were you okay with it, or did you have any regret, or I mean, how were you dealing with that?
Regrets probably. I cried a lot. And part of it was about losing my own identity. Being just totally consumed with building this company for 14 years and then one day not being involved at all and not being invited to the company Christmas party and not being invited to the company summer party. It was really, really difficult. But I just, remember what, my passion was around helping other people and especially helping people achieve financial independence through entrepreneurship, which was something that I'd done at LetterLogic. I help employees build their companies and even finance their companies. And so, now I spend a lot of my time doing that. I started an angel investment firm to help women scale their businesses, and I'm mentoring over 17.
It's crazy. 17 people.
Growing their businesses. So I was just able to refocus my attention away from the LetterLogic family and more toward the entrepreneurs.
So, Sherry, what are some things that helped you in that transition? And was there books? Was there people? Like, how did you actually process that and actually go through the shift?
That's a great question. I had been a member of EO, but I dropped out of EO when, because I was just too busy to attend the forums, I told myself. And so as soon as I sold the company, one of the first things that I did was rejoin EO because I felt like I needed to, keep my chops up in regards, leading a company in case I ever wanted to do it again. And I found such consolation through them and through consolation and encouragement, that I still had value to bring, and wealth of experience to share with other people. So I could get satisfaction that way.
What did you feel the need to jump right in? Did you give yourself some time? How did you, so obviously you're getting some help here. I mean, the reason I asked that here is so many entrepreneurs, they either like jump right into something or, deploy all their money and they like in search of trying. So it's like failing in search of trying to find your new identity. I mean, did you give yourself some time or did you immediately jump right in or how did you go about that?
Somebody gave me a book called Crazy Times when I sold the company, which was how you really go kind of crazy when you first sell a company and you spend too much money or you start a new company too quickly. And so I was mindful of all that. And I was a little cautious. I think I should have been a little more cautious in regards, philanthropic activities. I just said yes to everything that came my way, thinking I would have tons of free time, and I don't. But although I invested in some, women-owned businesses about that time, I've been very careful with my money.
So what is on the agenda in today's time? Because I know you got a book that you're working on. Maybe give us a little bit of, what's the premise of the book? How did you pack all this passion and experience? And what's kind of the message of it?
The book is called SQS, The Status Quo Sucks. That was our motto at LetterLogic, to encourage everybody to don't be afraid of making a mistake. We can correct a wrong, but just, always be willing to try something new. And The Status Quo Sucks is about, my belief that every company would be more successful if it took better care of their people. And so I talk about, what that meant to us practically and some, wonderful programs that we have within the company, a favorite of which was my practice of what I call Lunch with Lucy, which was Wednesdays were open for any employee to take me to lunch. They would choose the restaurant and they would choose who else would accompany us. I would pick up the tab, but we would go and talk about anything that they wanted to talk about. And that Lunch with Lucy gave me tremendous insight into things that were going on within the company that I would not have been aware of otherwise. But it also gave me insight into that person and what drove them and what their dreams and passions were, so that I could help them realize some of their dreams. And so, the book was practical tips for ways for employers to engage with the employees without breaking the bank.
That's so awesome. I mean, I think it's all the compounding little things and really caring. I mean, you can just sense it with your genuine care that, people are willing to go the extra mile, but it's because it's a mutual relationship. It's not a dictatorship at all.
I love those people. We built the company together. I could not have done their jobs, and I miss them.
Well, I love it. And is it, when we think about all the things that we've talked about, Sherry, is there something that you want to highlight? And make sure that you leave the listeners with, or if there's something maybe we haven't touched on about culture or the actual selling or transition? I mean, is there one thing that you want to leave them with?
Over the last year and a half since I sold the company, I've had so many other entrepreneurs approach me that have sold their businesses and either stayed in for a tale of 18 months to 5 years, and those who did and those who didn't. And I can tell you without a doubt, the happiest ones are the ones who exited with the sale and had zero involvement after that. And every one of us that I've talked to, they all believe that the company is healthier because of it. And the employees were able to make an easier transition because of it.
Were they ready? Those people that were really happy, did they see that, and were they emotionally and, socially prepared to walk away?
Yes. One made sure that he was socially prepared for it by planning for the entire next year to be traveling around the country, so that he would not be here to witness the pain.
What, and just, I think it's interesting how do you label it as pain. So what do you think is so painful about it?
Well, to me, it was really was like giving up a child, and interviewing potential parents for the child, and hoping that the new parent would love the child as much as you did, and it's in hindsight, it's not that the new parent doesn't love the child the same way. It's just that it's not that they don't love them as much as they love them differently. And
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good way to articulate it. And because, I mean, yeah, it's very intangible sometimes, isn't it?
yes, yes.
If there's a good way for our listeners to get in touch with you and to look out for the book and that's coming out soon, what is the best way for them to reach you?
The best way is to email me at Sherry at sherrydeutschmann.com. LinkedIn is a good way to get to me too.
Sherry, I'm so happy we've got to finally reconnect, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Ryan. It was my pleasure.